Cicely Garrett. Cicely is the Interim Just Energy Director at the Partnership for Southern Equity. She's also a creative strategist and social entrepreneur, providing thought leadership and consulting on strategy, design thinking, racial equity, environmental justice, food sovereignty, and community wealth building. Cicely spearheaded the production of Resilient Atlanta and the transition of the Mayor's Office of Sustainability to the Office of Resilience under the 100 Resilient Cities program.
I was asked today to come on behalf of Partnership for Southern Equity and talk about some of the equity issues in the IRP. And just to give people a little background, because we've used so many acronyms. So I am from Partnership for Southern Equity, PSC, not to be confused with PSC, the Public Service Commission. We are very, very different entities. But Partnership for Southern Equity advances policies and institutional actions that promote racial equity and shared prosperity and growth in both Metro Atlanta and the American South. And, we primarily, when it comes to our Just Energy portfolio, we primarily work with Black people, communities of color, marginalized and low wealth communities, basically the global majority, to understand the sourcing and commodification of power generation, and to take action in support of equity-centered energy, utility, and climate programs and policies. So that is primarily our interest in the Integrated Resource Plan, is because it affects the communities that is the focus of our work and beyond. And because it greatly affects those communities, then that's why we feel like we should have a role and an interest in advocating for changes in the IRP. Next slide. So I was asked to come and talk about equities, and you can click in. And so, if you go through the IRP, the word equity actually only appears 3 times. It might actually be 2, but I think it's 3 times total in the whole 1,500 pages. So, it is kind of hard to, have a focus and a priority on equity if you don't actually use the word, through several pages of the documents, and then you can hit it again. And so, and the use of the word actually doesn't appear in the context and how most of us would use equity. It is used as an explanation for how they are one of their measurements of assessing equity in some of the interventions and programs offered within the IRP. And so it's only mentioned in there in context of explaining this definition. So not even in layman's terms or usage throughout the document. And so, that sort of gives you a perspective of where this is coming from. Next slide. So what they do speak a lot about is energy efficiency. And you'll find a lot of this in Chapter 8. And as Kevin mentioned, what they will affectionately describe as demand side, or part of their demand side strategy. And so when you look in this section, you'll see that, they talk about that the demand side management is an important resource mix for them. So, that's a combination of both programs, energy, demand response programs, energy efficiency programs, policies, pricing, tariffs, other energy efficiency initiatives are all part of one of their main strategies there. And so, as Kevin mentioned, they have offered to extend most of their core programs that they already have, as well as some expansion in income qualified programs. And to define income qualified programs, that basically means that for most of the programs, your household income is 200% or less of the US federal poverty lines. And so, all these programs are currently in existence, and you can find out more about them on their website. I highlighted the programs in green because these programs are the ones that are specific to income qualified program. The other energy efficiency programs, not to say that they aren't as useful, they are more broader terms. So the first one is, about doing education and awareness around energy efficiency in K through 12. The second one is just more general to the public around energy efficiency. And then you have some programs contained in there that are income specific. And the HopeWorks program is income qualified and also for seniors. And so even out of the full list of programs, there are 4 programs that are specific for those who are income qualified. and the population who is most likely to be energy burdened. Hence the need for us to talk about some of the equity issues that could be either gained or lost with the IRP. So while I do think it is good that they are proposing to expand some of the programming, I have to say that, expansion is relative. So one of the programs that, they're talking about expanding or extending is the RISE pilot. The original program around the RISE pilot was for them to reach 500 households for the whole state of Georgia. So, expansion, how much does that mean? And was 500 even a good place to start if we think about the full state of Georgia of people qualified for the programs? And then how effective are these current programs in reaching those target populations that it is meant to? These are all questions that I think need to be answered in greater detail in order for us to have a greater satisfaction about how IRP aligns and, where does equity show up in this and how does it come out in our day-to-day. So next slide. And so, I think there's I like to think of them as opportunities for, IRP, not IRC, typo there. So opportunities for IRP going forward. And so one of them, I think, is a movement to prioritize people over profits. And so I'm not saying that as a for-profit business, they totally throw out the baby with the bathwater, but I do think that it is really hard to reach somewhere with satisfaction to what us as community partners and other interested parties would want to see with equity if there isn't some centering of people. And so what you measure is what matters, and all the ways in which they measure even energy efficiency and other things that are indicators don't specifically measure equity, and they don't talk about it in terms of people. They have what they call total resource cost, or you'll see TRCs in the document, and that's how they measure success. And so if you're measuring success based on that and not people, then it is really hard for you to ever end up at some equity place that greatly benefits the public. And so I think there are some opportunities for them to do that in it. And then to also think about how effective are the programs in relative to the population that is intended to benefit from it. And with that, I mean, there are some opportunities where a lot of the programs, even if you look on the website, are primarily made for residential or single family owners, but a lot of them are most energy burdened persons or renters and or live in multifamily. And so how do we also make sure that these incentives and programs benefit people who may be renters or in multifamily dwellings as well, and expand income qualified programs as they relate to that as both under energy efficiency and as a move toward equity. You can keep clicking through. I also think that if it matters, then you also need to dedicate adequate resources to the income specific energy efficiency programs, as well as the community partners. And so I don't think that Georgia Power needs to be all things to all people. There are lots of us on the outside who could do that and help make the translation. There are lots of us who have really great ideas, like Dr. Brown gave you 20 plus slides on how things could be better. So I don't actually think that they should be making it all up themselves, but before you produce this 1,500 page document every 3 years, why not ask us and then actively include some of the shaping of programs and policies that is to come from it, from those who know best from the outside and from the people who are most affected by it. And then I also think one of the things that I think is a barrier, and Kevin mentioned this, I mean, there's hundreds of pages of charts and words that it took all of us. I mean, Dr. Brown's a PhD, I am not, but the amount of time it takes to comb through it for things that affect all of the population, then I do think the data and information should be presented in a more palatable format. It should be information that should be able to be interpreted or at least understandable or accessible by all. And just putting it on the website in a PDF, and because we can search for it and bring it up, does not make it accessible or therefore useful to all of who is affected by it. And so I definitely think there needs to be a move toward how information is presented, how it is conveyed, how it is described, if it is intended for all of us to participate in this process. And especially for those most affected, if you are really going to get at the heart of equity, I shouldn't have to be on this webinar to speak on behalf of others. People should be able to speak and advocate for what it is they need for themselves. And there should be a greater connection between that and how we present information, even, if it's important. I don't know that it needs to be this level of what you need to have to be able to understand something that affects a great portion of the population. And so these are what I see as opportunities for the IRP moving forward. And as Kevin said, a good portion of it may not shift, but I don't think that, that is where we accept that and leave. I think we keep pushing, even if it's for incremental change, and eventually it leads to large scale change. But I think there are definitely opportunities that, do not require, I feel like what would be a lot to ask, but I think would make tremendous strides and efforts, and what the rest of us would like to see on the outside.